In this demo, I want to go ahead and take a look at some of the more advanced positioning scenarios that you'll get into with uh, dynamic HTML, as well as what happens if I want to just remove elements or replace them. So I'm going to start with an empty HTML page, and I'm going to call this Advanced DHTML Positioning. And again, I'll have an external script source titling this DHTML again. I'm going to trigger an init method. So here's a script where I trigger an init method. And in this first scenario, I want to go ahead and start with a situation where I have three different sections for my site. So a heading, a content area, and a footer. So I'll go ahead and just have divs with class equal to heading, div with a class equal to content, and a div with a class equal to footer. And I'm going to go ahead and save that on the desktop in a new folder called dynamic HTML, and this file will just be named index.html. Okay, so then the way this is structured, and it looks like it just saved this HTML file on my desktop, not into the DHTML folder. So what I want to do is I want to move this. So we should be okay there. And then I'm going to go ahead and create that dhtml.js file. So dhtml.js. Here's my init method. And I want to create a tag that's going to fall in between my heading and my content section. So I want it to fall on line 12 where my cursor is currently positioned. I want to create a new element. It's going to be a div, and I want the class to be equal to subheading. Okay, so that's the idea here, is that I want to create a subheading div. So I'm going to create a new div. So I'm using document.createElement. It's going to be a div tag. My sub is going to have a class attribute called subheading. So I'm going to set the attribute. And then I want to position it, and this is where I run into problems with the append child method. I want to position it right after the heading. So my normal mode of operation would be I just want to use the append child method relative to either the body or the heading or content or footer, so some reference element. But any way I slice up this HTML, I'm going to have a problem with that append child method, because the append child method always adds my element as the last child. So if I do that relative to the body, it's going to position it after the footer. If I do that relative to the heading, it's going to position it inside the heading. If I do it relative to content, it positions it inside content, and same with footer. And I don't want any of those. I want my div exactly on line 12 as a subheading. Okay, so the method that I'm going to use is I'm going to use the method insert before. Okay, so the insert before method says, okay, relative to the body, I'm going to insert my new element before this existing child, which would be content. Okay, that's the way the method would read. Okay, so I'm going to use document.body.insert before, and I want to insert it before. And if you think about this, and I always mess up the order, the way this is going to work is I want to insert it before some existing child, and then I want to insert my new child. So you can think of it as this method insert before takes two parameters, old and new, and I can't remember the order, so we'll try this. So I want to insert it before. I want to insert it before that element that has the class of content. So I'm going to use the query selector method, so document.querySelector, and I'm selecting the element that has a class of content, and I'm going to insert my new sub. Okay, and to be honest with you, I don't know the order of these parameters beforehand, so we're going to see how it goes. And the reality is if it causes an error, I know I have to switch the order of the parameters. So I'm going to go ahead and view this in a browser. So here we are. I go inspect the page, and I'm looking at my HTML body. So I expand that out. You can see that I don't have my subheader. If I look at the console, it looks like it failed. Okay, so great. I know that my new element is going to get inserted before my existing element, which is the content element. Okay, now it looks like the error disappeared. If I go back over to my elements, you'll notice that the heading now appears, and we have a subheading positioned right after the heading without without an issue in terms of, it's not nested inside the heading. It's exactly where we wanted it. So we can get really granular about where we're inserting these elements. Okay, so then the next example that I want to go through is what happens if I decide I don't really want a footer? Okay, it just doesn't need to be there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that footer. Okay, it doesn't need to be there. We decided we don't want a footer, it's gone. So the way this works is there's a method called remove child. Remove child is relative to a parent. Okay, so let's handle this, and we're going to do this a couple different ways because we can run into problems. But I know that the footer is a child of the body, so I can remove child, and then I'm going to use my document.query selector again to remove the footer. Okay, and we should see, if we run this, that there is no footer anymore, so we're just at the content, and then we go right into the JavaScript. So the footer was removed, and there's not a problem there. Where we run into problems is we're making an assumption about the HTML structure at this point. And what I mean by that is, what happens if I change this structure? So what happens if I put a container here? And then I take all of this stuff that I had before, and I move it into that container. Okay, so a designer comes along and says, well, no, we really need this container so we can make this mobile friendly. So now I come back over, and I'm looking at my site. I've saved the HTML page, I've saved the JavaScript file, and now I have problems. Okay, I have two problems. I have a problem with the insert before, and that I'm also going to have a problem with the remove child. Okay, and the problem is that content and footer are no longer child elements of the document.body. Okay, so I made an assumption that those are child elements of the body, and they're not anymore. Okay, so what I can do is I can say, well, I really want the parent node of content. So I'm going to go ahead and have a variable called content parent, and I'm going to go to the content and ask for the parent node. And then I can do the same thing for the footer. So I'm going to say I want a footer parent, and instead of getting the content, I'm going to select the footer and go to the parent node. And then instead of using document.body as my context element, I'm going to use the content parent and the footer parent. Okay, so now I come back over to the browser. Things look good there. If I look at the elements, you'll see that I have my container, I have my heading, subheading, content, and the footer is removed successfully. Okay, so the one thing that I would like to refactor here is I'm on line 6 going out and selecting the content and determining the parent node. And then on line 7, I'm again going out and selecting the content because that's where I want to insert it. So that's my reference element. What I want to do is anytime I go select an element more than once, I want to create a variable for that. And then I can just use that variable instead of having to go search the document a second time. So I search the document once, and then I use that search result as a variable. Okay, so same thing here. I'm going to get the footer element, so I cut that. I refactor this, so I say, let me have a footer element. So I'm going to get a reference to it. I can then dynamically determine the parent node, and then I can also remove that footer element. Okay, so now if I refresh this, nothing should have changed. I just refactored things. So you'll notice I still have the container, heading, subheading, content, but no footer. I'm able to remove the footer. Okay, so that kind of makes things easy, and I'm able to dynamically determine the parent so that even if a graphic designer comes along and says, you know, this is the HTML structure that I want, that hierarchy, I want to change that around a little bit, I'm able to change that structure around because I'm dynamically determining what the parent is. And in this case, I need to know the parent because insert before is working based off of a parent. Remove child is working based off of a parent. I am going to need that parent element, so I'm going to need that parent node of the element that I'm working with. Okay, the last method that I want to talk about with regards to positioning is, let's say instead of using a div tag, I wanted to use a paragraph tag. Okay, so my content, I am fine with it as a div, but I want to change it over to a paragraph tag that has the same class equal to content, but I just want to use a paragraph tag instead of a div tag. Okay, so I'm going to create a new variable. So new content, it's going to be equal to document.create element. It's going to be a p tag. I'm going to add that class identifier. So I'm going to set the attribute class equal to content. And what I want to do is I want to get rid of the old div and add the new. So really I'm removing the old and replacing with the new. Okay, I could do that as both a remove and then an add. Okay, so that would be one way to do it. Another way I can do it is with a replace child method. So again, I can go to a parent element and call the replace child method. Okay, so I already have a variable for the content parent. Okay, so I'm going to reuse that variable here because I need to know what the content parent is. So I'm going to say go to the content parent, and there's a method called replace child. And again, I always have to test this out, but old and new is kind of the concept here. Replace the old element with the new element. Replace the old child with the new child. Our old child is the content element, and our new element is our new content. So we're removing the old and replacing with the new, and again, order is important here, but I don't know the order. We'll have to test it out. So if I go ahead and refresh this, I'm expecting to see a paragraph tag here. You notice I don't. In my console, it's going to tell me that I have an issue. And again, I have an order issue, new content with our content element, which will be our old element. And now if I refresh the page, notice there's no errors. If I look at my elements, you'll notice that my content is now a paragraph tag instead of a div tag, and life is good. There's no footer. So the three methods that we're really dealing with here in terms of positioning is we want to be able to insert before a specific child. We want to be able to remove elements. Excuse me. And we want to be able to replace existing elements with new.